Welcome to the University of Connecticut at Stamford's Art Gallery. My name is Ann Farrell. I'm a professor here at UConn, and I'm delighted to be a member of the Art Gallery Advisory Board. Right now, we have an exhibit by Miggs, Burroughs, and Paul Jones. This show juxtaposes Miggs's lenticular art with Paul's pinhole photography. It's a wonderful contrast, and it's a show that's smart and whimsical and fun and beautiful all at once. And we're so happy that our campus community will have the pleasure of living with this art for several weeks. It's a real bonus of being part of this community. As you walk into the gallery to see this show for the first time, you're immediately struck by the contrast between this bold color work of Miggs's and the more subdued work of Paul. And what's interesting is that as you spend time interacting with the two different forms, you understand how they both really reflect observations of humanity and of our peculiar habits. One of my favorites is the fried dough stand, partly because for me it evokes time in my childhood and simpler days that we all probably miss to some extent and romanticize. I have a favorite of Paul's that is part of his sort of carnival series. And as I spent some time in the gallery going back and forth between these works, I realized that these two, that the fried dough stand and the carnival works had a real connection for me, and I realized I was walking back and forth between them because carnival life is such an interesting facet of humanity, and it really interested me the way that these two things work together. I had no idea if they did it on purpose, but for me there was a real connection there, and I think that's what makes this show really interesting. There are also there are works that are familiar and accessible, and there are works that really require you to spend some time and thought. And that's one of the really nice things about having the opportunity to be, for me, I work on this campus, so I can spend lots of time thinking about these works and walking through and having them strike me in different ways at different times. So I love this triangular composition, and I found myself wondering, where is this and why did it strike you, and were you walking along and this triangle struck you?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things about the way I work. I have my camera with me all the time. So it's just when something strikes my fancy, or if it intrigues me, I just take a photograph of it. And this is downtown Fairfield. I live there. I've been for years. And I don't know how many times I've passed this intersection with my camera. But for some reason, this day, the light was right, whatever it was, I saw the triangle there. And I knew if I just got down a little bit lower and shot up through it, it would be a bold graphic design. And the camera's very wide angle, so it sort of exaggerates the thing. As a matter of fact, the camera's so wide angle, this is the shadow of the camera in the shot.
Wow.
The camera's only
that's a great artifact.
The camera's only about 6 or 8 inches off the ground. And it's a bright sunny day, so the exposure is actually very short for pinhole. At least for me, it was about 3 seconds. That's about as short a photograph as I make.
Well, and I can imagine the street sounds, and I see this blur here, which says to me that there's some movement in the truck.
Yeah, during the exposure, the truck came around. You can see it's
just
a
great.
reflection also.
Yeah,
Just come around the corner.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, of course, as a university campus, we can all relate to this one. School bus stop, fear and uncertainty. Well, finals are over here at UConn, so hopefully there's less fear and uncertainty. But isn't that life, that there's this sunny sign that both warns us about the school bus stop and child safety, and at the same time, we all know that the experience of school for many people is something that's not purely pleasant, and it's hard, it's difficult, and not everyone fits in. So this one is a favorite of mine, and it sits right next to the fried dough stand, which is just magnificent. Can't you feel yourself here? Can't you feel the heat of the summer night? And doesn't it look so lonely during the day, all shut up with no customers? But yet, we've all been at the shore or at a carnival when it's empty, and there's a certain stark beauty to that too. The environment is waiting to be peopled. It's great fun. So the Pink Panty Mermaid is one of my favorites of Paul's. And you can see that it is, in fact, the panties of a performer of some sort. And it's sort of a rainy day, and this person has clearly posed because, as Paul explained to me, it was approximately a 30-second exposure. So you can see on the right side, you can see around in the middle distance, you can see a large umbrella, and next to it there are these blurred figures, and it's people walking back and forth. So there was a relationship between the photographer and the subject here, where this person was willing to pose, and I imagined being one of the passers-by and thinking, what is that man doing? He looks like he's taking a picture of someone's underwear. So again, if you allow yourself the opportunity to enter the work, it really has a life of its own, and you can spend a lot of time thinking and imagining who this character is. She has no face, but we all can imagine and fill in, just like we know the experience of standing at the fried dough station on a hot summer night. So Miggs, I think this is one of the more arresting pieces in this show, and I'm wondering where it came from.
Well, thanks. It does seem to, people respond to it probably more than the others. I had the privilege of going on a safari a few years ago, took a lot of photographs with nothing particular in mind, just collecting images, things that struck me, as Paul does, kind of spontaneous, like, I don't know why, sometimes they're graphic, sometimes they're just bold, sometimes they're just weird. And this woman, we'd driven a few hundred miles through the Serengeti without a single, lots of animals, not a single human, and this woman is standing there in the middle of nowhere selling jewelry, nothing within 100 miles of her, and we were told that she walks there every day or every week to sell her jewelry. When I got home, I was driving down Main Street and realized, you know, the whole contrast, like the day after I got home, the culture shock. And I posed, this friend of mine, I had her dressed in the similar colors, and we just stood in the middle of Main Street in Westport, just to bring home the culture clash and the similarities of, you know, that's why it's called Sisters. I mean, regardless of the geography, the heritage, the race, they're sisters on the planet. Mm-hmm. You know, they just happen to have different surroundings. You know.
Well, what's so funny is that as Miggs is telling me about being in the Serengeti, I'm standing in a position where I see a woman wearing vintage hippie garb on Main Street in Westport, which happens quite a lot. But it really, so the language of sisterhood really means something there, because it is really, I think that's one of the unifying themes of this show, that it really expresses that that our humanity, and it's really nice. And this one is just so striking. This is one of my favorite pinhole photographs of Paul's, because it captures a moment in time, and it captures the feelings that this woman is having, and feelings that I think we can all relate to. And she's sitting here with her dog, and the dog's not sitting still. The dog is moving, because of course pinhole photography has a long exposure. So similar to the way Miggs's work changes as you walk by it, Paul's work reflects movement in its formation. So there's a really interesting link there between the two artists and the way that they represent our human experiences.